I've never had a conversation with Carlos that I didn't really enjoy. So he's going to take us through an exercise where we will be talking about the sacred space which surrounds death, dying, and grieving. We will then take a few minutes to simply absorb what we've talked about, and then we'll go over the questions and comments in the chat box. Then Wilka will come on. I introduced Wilka. She was our very first presenter. She is the president of the Elizabeth Kübler-Ross Elizabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation, Central Mexico office, and she has an incredible skill set. So, all right, Mr. Chancellor, I will turn it over to you from here.
Thank you, Lydia. Oh, good morning to everybody. Okay, so right on. So this is going to be a bit of an experiment. It's the first time I've given one of these talks through this medium, through the electronic medium. I'm not so much going to give a talk as I'm going to guide you through an exploration, a journey. I'm going to ask you to use a different space when you listen than what perhaps we are normally accustomed to listening with. So we live in a very fact-filled world, and we eat and consume a lot of facts, and these facts titillate and energize and activate our cranial brain, and that's very good. We need these facts to move about, to make decisions, and so on and so forth. Today, at least for the next 25-30 minutes, I'm going to ask you to connect to something different. Connect to the marrow of your bones. So imagine the bones that we have, and oftentimes we have these images of them being these very hard structures like scaffolding or something, but actually they're quite alive within us. They're flexible, they're constantly being destroyed and recreated, they're very impressive. And within the bones lies the marrow, and the marrow is warm and muddy and succulent. It's very much alive. And in many, many traditions, it's believed that that's where we house the ancestral and the collective memory. I'm also going to ask you to integrate your gut memory and your experience, because we will be touching back on experiences that I'm certain, I believe in one form or another, we've all lived through. So just feel for a moment those bones, how they give us structure, how they keep us upright, or they have us kind of leaning off to the side or maybe back, whatever's comfortable. And within the bones, I ask you to feel, imagine, contact, do what you need to do, so that you can observe and feel the marrow, warm and rich. You can imagine it like the magma in the core of the earth, and live in it, gentle. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to talk about the sacred space of dying, of being with the dying, and of grieving. A sacred space is a space outside of time. It is a space that does a paradoxical movement simultaneously. It takes us within, and it connects us without to something bigger than ourselves. We can have these sacred spaces throughout our lives. I imagine I am going to invite you to remember, if you've had it in your lives, a depression. That may seem like an odd invitation. I'm sure at some point or another, we've all been depressed in one form or another, perhaps for a couple of days, perhaps most of our lives. Now, depression is something as a society we fight very much. We have the idea, we have the concept that we need to get out of depression. And so everything that we do is to bump ourselves out. And indeed, the idea is not to necessarily drown in it, but if we think of a depression, the way that it feels, if we can enter with curiosity and give it its space, it might be interesting what we discover. So what would happen if we enter into this space with the same judgment that we give, say, trees whose leaves are falling in autumn? We may grieve the falling of the leaves, but the tree losing its leaves is just so. A very natural thing. Sometimes, just so, we enter depression, using depression as a sort of step into these larger topics that we'll talk about in just a second. So what do you feel in depression? Even the word itself is very visceral, is very imaginal. Depression, as though something is on top, right? Things slow, there's a movement downwards, a sort of racination. Roots and lead, perhaps, are images, depths and holes, pits and, abysses. So there's this image of a downward movement. I think one of the reasons why we fight so much depression is, in a certain sense, it would appear to be very inconvenient. We go about our lives, we go about the mundane life, right? And remember that mundane comes from the word mundus, which means world or earthly. So let's remove this negative connotation of the mundane as though it's boring, but rather to say of the world, which is perfect and fine and fantastic. And it is a sphere of action, it's a sphere of interaction. It's all very good. And it's where we go about our daily routine lives. We work, we make money, we do our thing, we wake up, brush our teeth, groom ourselves, whatever that should mean to each of us. And then we go about achieving our goals. And with the idea that we move forward, we move into growth, we're progressing. That's all within the sphere of the mundane. Then suddenly something occurs, and we can enter a depression. And a depression, if you listen, if you feel it, if you engage with it as something that has come, if you engage with it with curiosity, you'll find that the depression says, hey, but right now, you're not going to move forward. You're going to stand still, or you're going to sit still. You're going to be still. In fact, I have come to offer you the gift of lead in your veins. Any movement shall be difficult. It will take more. You'll have to expend extra energy to go about your mundane routine. The brushing of your teeth, the showering, the ritual of grooming, the going to work, it's going to be much more difficult. And your mind, your soul, is not going to be there. You shall be distracted. So it says, sit still and observe and listen. And it creates its own time out of time. We suffer depression, note the word suffer, because we are fighting it. Because we believe we need to be outside of it. And so we may take pills, or we may distract ourselves, or we may do this, or we may do that, because we believe that we need to be somewhere else. Because we don't live in a context, for the most part, where we are invited into the stillness, into this inner journey that depression brings us into. In a sense, depression says it's over. Whatever it is that you thought. Now stop. Recalibrate. Reorient. Take inventory. Do what you need to do for yourself. To go in and search. Because the direction in which you were going, that's no longer valid. It creates a sacred space. A space out of space and out of time for an inward journey, or what may be painful. But that's its place. I use depression because we've all gone through it in one form or another. We've all probably fought it. We've all, tried to remove ourselves out of it. So too are these sacred spaces created when we are in the presence of death. Whether we are journeying with or journeying towards, well, we're always in a certain, we're always journeying towards. We're journeying towards as the final descent, right? Like when we're in their airplane and starting all of its, you gotta buckle up and put up your seat tray because you're about to land. In the presence of death, in the presence of the great mystery, which is just like the stars at night, the constant background of our lives, as we move towards that, time no longer becomes the time that we live each and every day. As we live and as we go about the mundane world, at least for the most part in our culture, time is an asset, time is a resource, time is a commodity that we must apply, we must do, and we must make, and we must produce. We must use our time productively. But in the presence, in the sphere, in the field of death, before this entity and before this mystery,
Carlos.
it's a sphere of transformation from within and from without. And all we need to do in that transformation is be present to it. So I'm going to invite you for a few minutes, maybe one or two, just to sit with whatever's come up, because whatever's come up right is perfect. See if something has fermented up, something has bubbled, something has transformed, something has sparked, something has kindled, ignited, moved, or not. Could be an inspiration, it could be a yawn, it could be a rejection, that's perfect. Sit there just 1 minute with whatever it is that's come up. Sit there with it. It is a part of you, but it's not you. It's a company. Yes, ma'am.
A question that comes up.
Please.
Grief is such an interesting topic, and when we feel it, how we feel it, what causes it. Do you have any resources, books, meditations, anything like that, that when someone is in a state of grieving, and I think the natural reaction is, what can I do about this? How do I deal with this? What wisdom is there that can help me? I mean, I think, we're all grown adult people, and I think we know that you can't just dismiss grieving. You're going to grieve whether you want to or not. But are there any tools that you know of that one would find comforting during a time of grief?
Yeah, yes. Thank you for that question. What a wonderful question. Books and literature, there's a lot. There's a lot. They're fantastic resources. I, of course, am very a little biased, but there's books from Elizabeth Kübler-Ross, for instance. She's a fun writer. If you've ever read her, she's very bubbly, very charismatic. But to speak from the soul, to tell you a little bit of, to answer your question, yeah, as with any really strong emotion, and this is going to be tough, love it, invite it in. And when I say love, I'm not talking about this Walt Disney love. I mean, love it as you love your child who may be misbehaving, or who is, maybe, your child who's maybe an addict at the moment, Love it. Let it come in. Listen to it. Hold as much space, be with it. Our suffering comes mostly from fighting that which is there. We will suffer the more we ignore something. So that's mine in a nutshell and to the point. That's my advice. Embrace and love the grief and know that it is there, because that's exactly where it needs to be. And sometimes when we love, we can be angry at something and still love it. We can, do whatever.
I wonder if psychologically, if grief puts us through that transition, as you talked about it, as a sacred space, does it do something to us psychologically? Is there a healing that goes on? Or is it just merely suffering because we've lost something that we valued and treasured?
No, again, the more we fight it, the more we suffer. But it is a transformation. It's a very painful transformation. I like to use, I think it's a beautiful image to think of the transformation of a butterfly. And the chrysalis phase, the phase, when it's in its cocoon. And there are some butterflies that are in transition, from caterpillar to butterfly. Some will, they don't have bones, they have exoskeleton, but the structure that they had as caterpillars must shatter, must be destroyed in order for the butterfly to come out. But then there's this is incredible, there's other butterflies that turn completely, the caterpillar turns completely into a liquid. It liquefies, inside its chrysalis. And then its memory, its genes, its information will transform it into a butterfly. We can imagine that is an incredibly painful and terrifying image. Even if you think of the image of the transformation, it causes some streak of terror because it's losing its previous identity. That which we loved, that which we grieved, or that which we loved enough to honor with grief was a part of who we were. And they'll continue to be a part of who we will become, but there must be a transformation. And that transformation is painful, whether we suffer it or not.
Andrea has asked, you say just be present with these states. Does that require a set of skills or just the consciousness to observe yourself?
Well, the consciousness to observe yours, I would not reduce that to a just. That's a big skill. It's a big skill to be able to be with ourselves. It also, it helps, it's very important to have others, you know? To have others that can just be there with us, you know? Not others who are going to give us advice, not others who are going to distract us, you know, from our pain, that tends to be our reaction to seeing somebody in pain, is to distract them from the pain. Is to say, oh, don't worry, let's do this, or whatever, right? So it helps if we can be with another human that can just be there with us, you know, because pain is a big thing, and sometimes we need the other person. It's like carrying a couch, you know. It's difficult if you do it alone, but with two people, you can move the couch pretty easily, you know.
All right, Jürgen would like to know if you could elaborate on being present and living in Kyros.
Uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. The well, being present just means being with what's there. I think that I don't like to use the word allowing because it implies a kind of control, but yeah, sure, allowing, permitting, being, you know, as opposed allowing in the sense of closing down the defenses, right? Having a curiosity. Curiosity is one of the greatest lines, guiding lights towards being present to something. So curiosity says, oh, I want to get to know this. I'm not thinking of how it's useful to me. I may discover that, but I'm not thinking, oh, I wonder if I could use this for, you know, for whatever reason, or how can I exploit, or how can I use this as a resource. That's not so much curiosity. Curiosity is, oh, what is this? I want to know this. You know, what's going on here? Curiosity is a great way of being present. And Kairos, that one, that's interesting because that one kind of happens in itself. When I'm in the right place at the right time, then I'll be in Kairos and not in Chronos, not in linear time. That one is, I can't really push that. I just have to know where to be somehow. I use my intuition, attention to the right space, and then
All right,
Kairos.
and we have time for the last question, and I think this is a really good one. Great interest.
Yeah.
What do you recommend if what is coming up is a desire to end one's life?
Ah.
Love that too.
Good question.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Andrea.
and I love that. First of all, there's an enormous observation, wherewithal, and bravery just to ask that question. The be with it. Be with the question. Listen to it. Oftentimes, the desire to end one's life is the desire of the caterpillar to not want to be a caterpillar anymore. And the caterpillar not wanting to be a caterpillar anymore is absolutely right and proper. Does that mean a literal death? Perhaps. I don't want to say no. But most often it means a caterpillar now must go into the transition to become a butterfly. When we think of death, of dying, of killing ourselves, there is always a call for something in us to die, for something previous to die, to be laid to rest. It's a transformation. It's a call, really, and most often to rebirth. Grief is a state of transformation. As I said, as I implied, we're moving from one state to another. And the pain of that is quite strong. But usually, the call towards our own dying, towards our own taking of our own life, is more metaphorical. So the funny thing, and the thing that could, I'm kind of glad that I'm in Mexico and not in the United States or Canada, because I could lose my license for saying this, is listen, really, truly listen to what that desire towards suicide, towards death, towards self-death is asking for.
Thank you, Carlos. That was really interesting.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for indulging this experiment. Like I said, the first time I've ever done this through a computer. But everything came out very nicely. You were wonderful, all of you.
Thank you so much for your time. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. All right, now over to Wilka, who is going to give us a wrap up of the series and kind of touch some of the high points, the different speakers that we've had, and what she thinks are main takeaways that we really want to keep in mind. And I would reiterate Carlos mentioning Elizabeth Kübler-Ross' book. I mean, you've probably heard of her, The 5 Stages of Grieving. It's been a long time since I've read her books, but I'm ready to get back and read them again, particularly after this workshop. So I'll definitely be looking that up and taking a look at it. So Wilka, up to you, my dear.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's always wonderful to be with all of you and share this interest in exploring our mortality in all aspects of being. So before I go into that, I just want to offer you it's my duty as the president of the Elizabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation in Central Mexico to offer a clarification about the stages. Because the stages that come out of Elizabeth's work started out with her working with the dying. Her most transformative book for where we are today was a book she wrote 50 years ago on death and dying. And this book came out of a seminar that she organized with the university. I think it was the University of Chicago and the medical students, where they decided to ask the patients about what it's like to be dying and what they go through in that process and what it's like in the hospital, all these different things. And this became a really incredible and thorough experience of letting our patients be our teachers. And so I feel this is one of her greatest contributions in forgetting that we are experts, because we are experts in one way, but as human beings, we're experts more than we are as professionals. And so to hand it back to the patient and empower them with their experience to teach us what we cannot know when we are not actively dying. And in that process, which I highly recommend that you look into it if it calls to you, she was able to identify a wide range of emotional responses, which ended up being called stages, for lack of a better term. And Elizabeth herself regretted having used the word stages because it was so misinterpreted. You know how people use our words against us sometimes. So what she was talking about was what she observed over and over that was arising in a dying patient as a response to loss, but not necessarily grieving. It can show up in grieving, but in the face of loss, in the face of the loss of my life, in the face of the loss of what I know, in the face of the loss of what I love, in the face of the loss of what I am capable of the functions of my body, and so on, right? Every single thing that we will face in that process of dying. And she observed more than 13 stages that she could give a name to. So it wasn't even that she said, okay, it's these ones and no other ones. It's just that these were the ones that she could identify and say, oh, people go through shock. Shock is one of the quote unquote stages, right? They go through a preparatory grief. They go through a partial denial. They go through stages or phases of hope. And so in that first book, she actually has a graph where there's at least 10 that she names and shows in a sort of funny progression potentially. But she also, ¿cómo se llama? Enforces the fact that we don't strive for acceptance. Her observation was that most patients came to an acceptance that allowed for a smoother transition. But it doesn't mean that we necessarily must get to acceptance and that this is a linear process that we better just go through, right? So it's very important for us to remember this. There is no one particular line of progression in our personal process of confronting loss or going through grief or facing our own dying. And so I just wanted to share that with you, that there are many more quote unquote stages, that it is not linear, that we can go back and forth from acceptance, back to anger, back, into depression, into denial, back to shock. We can go into numbness. There are many other elements to this experience. Eventually, toward the end of Elizabeth's life, she collaborated with David Kessler to write the book On Grief and Grieving, which became a little bit of a nutshell of some of the work that she was, she did a lot of work. She wrote over 23 books, and there are many more unpublished manuscripts that we still don't know, but that Stanford University now has. And so the Grief and Grieving book became a manual that can be accessible to any person. And there is a way in which Elizabeth did regret having made it into a nutshell of 5 stages, because everybody kind of lost track of everything else and just focused on a very, very small element of what is the wholeness of what we can experience. And so with that, I leave you with the little, hopefully an expansion of what is possible with Elizabeth Kübler-Ross's work. And so today I just wanted to review with you very quickly about just that hopefully you're all a little bit more informed, a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more clear about what you need for your own preparation in this thoughtful dying. And so we talked about from the beginning, and all of our colleagues throughout the series were able to touch upon, in fact, you could notice that it cannot be fully separated. We can't just say we're dealing with physical preparation, or we're dealing with emotional preparation, or we're dealing with spiritual preparation. There's always overlap, but we want to consider and not just get stuck with one aspect. We want to consider the physical considerations of what we want and need with our bodies, with our physical possessions, with our, what we want after our death, all of that. We also want our mental, intellectual, analytical needs considered with what we think about everything that could be happening to us, how we communicate all of these things, if we have any concerns and considerations. We want to also consider our emotional and psychological and spiritual aspects, which somehow get rolled into one, with what is our unfinished business, what are our regrets, our guilts, our shames. And I have made a questionnaire for you that I will send to the whole list, hopefully by the end of this week, so that if you're interested in looking deeper into your own unfinished business, you can do that. And of course, I'm happy to, and our team for the foundation is happy to support you, guide you, answer questions, hold space for you, whatever you need in that process of self-inquiry and self-discovery with what needs to be given closure to or resolved inside of you. And then there's the social relational, where we consider what is our legacy, what has been the meaning of our life, and what we want to leave behind. Of course, also repairing in ourselves whatever feels unfinished, and relationships that can be repaired in life. And so anyway, we can continue this conversation for a long time, but I just wanted to, just go over all of that again. And then if you have questions about that, we can talk about it at any point. We can email each other. We can bring it to the forum and actually have a session about any of your bigger questions. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about a concept that is not too young, I think it's not that young, but it's pretty new. It started in Canada and it's moving into the States. And of course it goes back to the way things were before in our sort of ancestral times. But it's about creating, generating, cultivating safe space for grieving and dying in our communities. And so the technical term that you might have heard is community death care or community grief care. And this is something that the foundation is striving toward. And in a way, it starts with you. We are very grateful that your community is so engaged and interested and active in taking responsibility and considering the community where we are and where we will die. That part of our responsibility in this is to support that generating of a safe space. And so what that means is that we hope that one day we can have grieving be a normal part of our everyday in our communities, where dying can be something that we can share in our families and our communities in a way that is more collective and not just whisked away and we're just in our own thing on our own. And then we have attention from our community for a week or two or maybe a month, and then everybody moves on with their lives and we're left alone in our grieving process. And so this is something that is evolving. It involves these kinds of conversations, and it involves more education. And you know what it involves? It involves being honest about what we're going through and what we're doing, that we could take, what we learn here and share it with someone. Because if all of us are having these questions, but none of us are expressing these questions, then everybody thinks they're the only one having the questions. If all of us have fear and have strong emotions, but we don't speak about it with anyone, then every person thinks they're the only one going through it. So eventually, we want to have a community, as you have been able to do in your UU community, so that no matter where we are and who we are with, we can have an open conversation that invites other people to realize that they're not alone in their grief. They're not alone in their fear of loss. They're not alone in these moments of deep rest, depression, and stillness. And that we actually can guide each other. We can hold space for each other, as Carlos was saying, to find another person with whom we can share and speak without judgment. That's a big part of it. We're all afraid that we're going to be judged as the odd one. So we can open up that space and we can allow for that to evolve. We allow to learn from each other and our different processes. And so this is part of what we are already doing. Unconsciously, maybe, not fully intentionally, but we are doing it. And I'm very grateful to all of you for it. And then the other thing I wanted to say, well, somebody asked about it here. Let's see. So maybe we'll look at the questions. Oh, it's just, let's see. Somebody asked about green burial. Yes. Thank you for that question. So next week, we're going to have an information session on Tuesday at 1 p.m. Our time here, in collaboration with the Green Burial Council. And this will be, if you give me permission, I can just send that link to everyone. And then you just have it and you can join us. So maybe we can coordinate that later. So that way it's easier. You can email me and then we could do that, but I could just send it to all of you and then hopefully you will join us.
I suggest Wilka,
Yeah.
Diana has got the email list for everyone because she's been sending these Zoom links out. If you'll just send her the notice on the green burials, she can send it out to everybody on the list. I've already signed up. I'm signed up.
Great. So what's so exciting about this is that, you know, the foundation has the mission of making green burial accessible to all. And right now, if this were something that we were interested in, yeah, we can have this fantasy, but right now, where is that happening, right? We have no idea. We don't know how it works. We don't know how to, you know, make the arrangements for it. And so, right now we in Mexico don't really have options. So, but we will very soon have options, and we're going to have options right here. And this is part of what we're doing, and this is part of what is currently happening. So we are talking about a reality for San Miguel not long into the future, that we can have eco-friendly options that include green burial and other ways of reducing carbon emissions, reducing all kinds of toxic stuff, reducing excess and unnecessary material waste, all of these things. And then in addition to that, giving back to the earth. You know, we are that apple that Carlos was talking about. We are that apple. And there's a moment when that we can be of service, not just to the earth, but to the future generations. Because if we can do this right, and this is part of what we're doing in collaboration with the Green Burial Council, is think about the ways in which we can honor our dead, honor our bodies, our lives, our loved ones, and at the same time, honor the earth, honor what was here before us, and honor what is coming after, right? This is one way, one very tangible way in which we can give back and we can give forward, we can pay it forward. So yes, and the idea with this movement is that we make it a community incentive, and it's not a privatized for-profit thing, that we make it about caring for our whole community and our where we live and all of that, and that we can offer this model to any community that would like to do it for their community, so that this is actually something that is part of our everyday. It's not something special. It's not something you have to, you know, be exclusive to get these kinds of things. So yes, so I will send you the information, so hopefully you will join us. And is there something on here? Okay.
I'll just mention, Wilka, while you're scrolling,
Yeah.
I will bring up again Dr. Pepe's book, My Old Age, a Menu I Must Choose, which I very highly recommend should you be having to make a decision about taking care of elderly parents or caretaking, what kind of things to take into consideration. And also it will definitely make you stop and think about what you want. So that's, I've really enjoyed reading it. It's 250 pesos. Francoise has made herself available to assist with delivery. If you live somewhere in the Centro area, I know she's loves to walk and has been getting her exercise. I think she said she had 6 of them to deliver, maybe sometime today. And I will mention also this book called The Dwindling. The author of this, Janet Dunnett, gave us a presentation after a Sunday service last year. She and her twin sister went through the experience in Canada of both of their elderly parents becoming ill and dwindling was the phrase that Janet came up with. And she wrote this book about what happened with her parents as she and her sister, the effect on their professional life and emotionally and spiritually. And it's very interesting. Janet self-published, and she left me with about 20 copies of the book. So anybody that gets Dr. Pepe's book will also get a copy of The Dwindling for free. Janet left it and said, please dispense these out to whoever would like to have one. My original plan was to take them to Sunday services so people could pick them up there, but obviously we don't know when that's going to happen again. So if you would like a copy and you buy Dr. Pepe's, then get in touch with Francoise. Diane, if you've got Francoise' email, or I know it's gone out as an email, just let Francoise know, and she'll work to make sure that you get copies of both of those.
Thank you. Carlos wants to make a comment, and then I would like to address the question about near-death experience.
Thank you, Wilka. So, as I was saying, just to reiterate, the sacred space has a paradoxical movement, one inner and one outer. And so even though our experiences in dying, grieving, depression are very particular to ourselves, are very personal, there is at the same time the need for community to contain, to hold, to witness that as well. So what Wilka was talking about, the community, is a very, very important matter. And this holding of the space, if even we can hold space for somebody's experience that may be unfathomable to us, their depression, their grief, their dying, just the fact that we are there, we're creating, and we're upholding that sacred space. That's it.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes. So I just get very excited about all of this stuff. Yeah. So yeah, again, I'm very grateful for all of your presence and interest in all of this. And I hope that when we start meeting in the next month, we have more opportunity for actual conversation, you know, more engagement from you, you know, so that we can evolve with what is arising in each of us as we are going through it. So in terms of near death, you know, one of the proposals that I have for you in the next coming months is to talk about symbolic language in life and dying, and how that plays a very important role in how we prepare and how we move through, and in how we hold space for others as we are moving through loss, grief, and dying. And there is a lot that we can learn. I've always told you, and I will continue to tell you, that if you have the opportunity to accompany someone in their process, whether it is grieving or dying, it's a huge learning experience that opens up a lot of what is unknown to us. You know, we are usually afraid of what we don't know. And the more that we are in the presence of what we don't know with another, without an agenda, without expectation, without judgment, but because we want to learn, and because we're there because we love and we want to hold, we just learn so much. And then what was once unfamiliar becomes something that we have a sense about. And then perhaps as we go through this process, we begin to become familiar, and we begin to notice certain things the way that Elizabeth did, you know. Maybe for us, it's not the stages, but we notice something. And for every one of us, perhaps the experience is unique, and each of us holds a piece of a larger truth. And so when we talk about near-death experiences, we have, you know, you've heard, I'm sure, of at least the most generic statements about it, which is that any person who goes into near death, there are certain things that seem to be similar. Maybe not exactly the same, but there are some things that bring question to what actually happens? Where do we go? Who are we if we are able to hear things and know things when we are clinically dead? And, you know, whether we want to accept it or not, it has been a fact that a huge number of people who have gone through near death have experienced similar things. And, you know, I think some of the most incredible, and Elizabeth Kübler-Ross also did a lot of studies with near death, and she herself put herself through into near death experiences, as she and her colleagues did, to try to understand better, you know, how can we know if we don't have near death? So a bunch of scientists, you know, medical doctors who were doing research were putting themselves in near death to see what would happen. So there are books about that as well. But anyway, what we have, I think some of the most impressive and most convincing, not that we're trying to convince anyone, but at least for me, it was reading about near-death experiences in children who have not had a chance or long enough life or, you know, intellectual capacity to have been conditioned into believing something, and blind people. Because blind people, even blind from birth, are able to see in near death and describe things that they didn't even know they could. And with children who they have no interest in convincing us of anything or, you know, sticking to any one agenda, you will see that they have knowledge of things that you would think impossible, and they seem to also have these particular levels of experience that are reported. And so what this means, I think that's a subjective point. You know, if you were to ask me, does this mean X or Y? I couldn't tell you. But each of us can have our own opinion about what this means. I am eager to share more with you about my experiences in accompanying the dying and what that has led me to understand. But, you know, I could never tell you that it's going to be true for you or that it's a general truth, nothing like that. Hopefully that was helpful. Any other questions? Yeah, Carlos is saying that Carl Jung knew that a young girl was about to die from a series of dreams that she was presenting, and she died a few months later. I've had that experience too. I'm no Carl Jung, but in fact, one of the things that led me to wanting to study more closely and become a death doula and all of that is because in my practice as a transpersonal psychologist, I began to observe what happened after two of my clients died at different times, different years. You know, it wasn't related one with the other, but these were people who didn't show any signs of, any outward signs of dying, no chronic or you know, terminal illness, nothing like this. You know, one of them was in her 60s and the other was, you know, he was in his 80s, but there was no apparent trajectory, even though we're all in that trajectory, you know what I mean. And their dreams were asking us to speak about unfinished business, guilt, shames, and brought up very, very specific issues that needed to be dealt with, and then eventually started to show this transcendence or this transformation. And there were themes that were showing up. And in fact, in one of the cases, the dreams were basically saying, how do you feel about leaving this body? That we have to talk about this now. And so, you know, as a guide, I had to say, you know, we can't continue to ignore this. This is very blatant. You know, if it was subtle 5 weeks ago, it is now completely blatant. So let's talk about it. And from my experience and my observation, our dreams guide us in that process if we pay attention. And so in my practice, we often use dreams as a guide for this process of preparing for a good death. And in the case of these two clients, we weren't planning to die at that time in particular, but the dream work guided the work so that when I found out 5 days later that they had died, in each case, different years, different times, I was at peace because I knew they were ready. I knew we had done the work. And so this now I'm more conscious about this as it's happening in the process, in the therapeutic process. And this is why I'm also a proponent, is that the right word? Yes, of dream work and paying attention to our dreams, because there's a lot that our dreams do for us in preparing.
I think Carol Turner has, I'm not familiar with this, but Carol Turner sent a notice out to everybody, someone who had 4 near-death experiences will be doing a workshop. And she's put the website address if you're interested in looking at that. 4 near-death, gosh, it's a cat with 9 lives, I suppose.
Mm.
So that's on that's in the chat room if you'd like to know about that. Thank you, Carol. Well, I don't see any other questions here, so unless you have additional comments or anything else you'd like to offer up, I think we're going to wrap this one up. Thank you, Carlos and Wilka, very much. It's been a wonderful experience working with all of you. Thank you so much for participating. So thank you all very much. It's been a real delight and pleasure to share this time and experience with you.